Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I, of course, am James Boyd, not joined by Jim Aiello this time, but actually Zak Keefer of The Athletic, my former colleague and co-beat in a way. So he's back to talk about these Colts because, Zach, this has been a season unlike anything we could have predicted. So I want to get your thoughts during the bye week for the second half of this year. So first off, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's funny. I still live in town, and so like when I'm out at coffee shops or out with my kids, like last year, the Colts fans would be like, "What the heck is wrong with this team? What are they doing? Why are they doing this?" And now it's like, "Hey, like you have any playoff tickets? Like, do you have a way to get me to go to the game?" So it's amazing how much has changed.
Yeah, no, it's funny because even just behind the scenes and a little tease for you all listening, we're working on some stuff about the Colts, and it's hilarious to have you kind of come back like, hey, I got this idea kind of floating around in my head. I want to revisit it. And it's like, well, yeah, now's the time to do it because last year these opportunities just weren't there. So,
Hey, last year we were writing a very, very different story about
oh,
this time.
absolutely. And
Right.
that's where I'll kind of start this thing. Now, to recap a little bit, this is the first podcast I've done since Berlin. So, Colts are 8-2. JT went off overseas. And I think, closed their first half of the season on a high note because I think going into Kansas City week on a two-game losing streak feels a lot different than going into it having bounced back, got another one under your belt, bounced back from the bad Pittsburgh game, got a win. And now I think it's not a primetime game, Zach, but it does feel like the weight of this game could change the national perspective of the Colts in a way. I know they've gained a lot of respect this year, but they're still like, are they for real? Is this legitimate? And this feels like the game where they could go out there and make a statement. So from your perspective, you've done some Chief stuff in the past. You've been to all the Super Bowls recently. How big do you think this game is for the Colts to kind of flip the narrative even more on how for real they are after going 8-2 through the first 10 games?
Yeah, I think it's a really symbolic game. And I know you're not going to hear that from anybody at 56th Street, but it matters. It weighs more than the other victories if they're able to get a victory. This is not just one of the games they played earlier in their season. This is the three-time defending conference champs. And the reality is, KC is right now not in the playoffs, not in the 17 field for the AFC to make the playoffs, and still have maybe some of the shortest odds to win the Super Bowl. That's the sort of weird place the Chiefs are in. It feels like this should be a Monday night game or a Sunday night game. It means that much, certainly for the Colts. A funny little tidbit, I was out at Kansas City Chiefs mini camp in the summer. Name the teams that Patrick Mahomes has a losing record against in the NFL. The Indianapolis Colts are one of them. And if the real listeners out there know, can you name the quarterbacks that beat this guy? Because one of them is Jacoby Brissett and one of them is Matt Ryan. I think that was your first year on the beat.
Yep.
So the Colts have had success against the Chiefs in the past, this version of the Chiefs. The other thing is, the reality is the Colts over the next four games, and I know Houston's in there, they're playing three of the four best defenses in football. Three of the four, starting with Kansas City, which is number three in points allowed. You got Houston, which is number one in points allowed. And I don't care what the Houston offense is doing right now. The defense is still very good. And Seattle, Mike McDonald's defense is balling. They're fourth in points allowed. So you're going to see, if you think Pittsburgh was tough, you're going to see what the real elite defenses look like the next 4 weeks. JT's going crazy. Daniel Jones is playing pretty well, but we're going to see how it measures up against playoff quality opponents. And the biggest test is Kansas City.
Absolutely. And I think that is a conversation that sounds so wild coming into this year because in our minds, we're like, okay, can you win your season opener for the first time in forever? They've done that. Now they're front
But
runners.
they've earned this
Oh,
conversation.
absolutely. Absolutely. I don't want to dismiss it. It's just weird in a way to think, oh, wait, they're actually pushing to be a legitimate contender. And I think a lot of people around here in these parts would say they are, given how well their offense is running, number one offense in the NFL. And a lot of their success is predicated on how potent that offense is. The defense, we can get into that with the Sauce Gardner trade and trying to upgrade there. But I think the matchup with Patrick Mahomes, even throwing out the history and recent success you've had against him, who cares? Because when you knocked them off the last time, and back in 2020, I believe, or 2022 actually, yeah, that was a nice little win for your year. You went 4-12-1. They went to the Super Bowl. I don't think they won it that year. So now the question becomes, in this era where it feels like the Colts are, refining themselves with Daniel Jones, I think what's interesting as well, Zach, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, is how different the landscape feels around them. And that to me is also very telling about this new window they've kind of opened for themselves, because this is not the dominant, super crazy, souped up Chiefs. The Bills just lost to the Dolphins. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are trying to backdoor their way into the playoffs. So it feels like, as much as the Colts have flipped the script a little bit, they've also benefited from the landscape changing a little bit as well.
You're right. For a long time, for 5 or 6 years, with respect to the Cincinnati Bengals and the run they made, this has been a three-team conference. Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City has been the Kings. The reality is, it's not just the Colts that are having this banner season. The Denver Broncos are 8-2. And you can say whatever you want about Bo Nix and the offense, but they're 8-2. Now that's a tough division. The Los Angeles Chargers are a game back at 7-3. And our old friends, the New England Patriots, are 9-2 after a win last night over the Jets. They're the one seed right now, the
Yeah,
Patriots. I
everything
would
old is new
kill
again.
I would kill for a Patriots Colts playoff game. I know it wouldn't be what it was back in the day, but that was the football I grew up on, and I love that stuff. The reality is, this is why you make the trade for Sauce Gardner. It's not just because of where you're at now, it's because what you see in front. Chris Ballard likes his team. That's what this move tells me. He likes the contract too, because it's actually pretty team friendly if you're talking about a number one elite corner. And Sauce Gardner's only 24. He's only 24 years old. So there's a lot ahead of him. But I think this move is more of a reflection of the Colts and where they see themselves going than Sauce Gardner and where he was with the New York Jets. And the reality is, and I tweeted this that day, you don't make this move if you don't think you have the quarterback on your roster right now. You do not trade two number one picks, two first round picks, which are some of the most valuable commodities in this league, if you think you need to go get a quarterback in the next couple of years. So this tells me Daniel Jones wants to stay in Indianapolis. This tells me Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard and Carly Ursay-Gordon want him to stay in Indianapolis. And so you can start to see the short-term future of this team. When's the last time we could say that, James? Like, maybe my third year on the beat. Like, it's
Yeah,
been that long to where you could see a 3-year window for this team and know what it looks like. That's the first step in contending in the AFC, is knowing who you are and knowing what you need to address in terms of holes on the roster.
absolutely. And we can definitely expand on the Sauce Gardner topic, because to me, I get that he slipped on the 2 point conversion against Drake London, and that became sort of a highlight. And people were like, oh man, I had a bunch of, Jets people in my mentions telling me, oh, this is what we're getting rid of. Good riddance. Fans can be a little bitter whenever the stars find their way to a new home. But I thought in that game, you saw his value. He was really good in pass coverage, and I think he gives them a certain level of aggression you can play with up front, because your back end is sewed up by a guy who is a two-time first team all pro. And even if he has slipped a little bit, now they wanted to get back to that level. But if his bad performances, talking to a guy like Zach Rosenblatt, who covers the Jets for us at The Athletic, if his bad performances is all, he's, instead of being an A+ cornerback, he's kind of like a, B+ A- now, that's still better than what you had. And the thing I want to throw at you is, and I had to kind of come to grips with it myself, the Sauce trade came after the disaster in Pittsburgh, after you committed 6 turnovers as a team, after Daniel Jones, for as great as he had been to the first 8 games of the year, he commits 5 turnovers, more than any other game he ever played for the Giants. So when that happened, what was your reaction to, oh my gosh, not only did they make the move, but they did it in spite of what they just saw? Because to me, I think I wrote it in the story, they had an exit ramp, or at least a little bit of like a turn signal they could have taken, and they didn't. They just stepped on the gas.
That would have been a reactionary move. Let me ask you this. Do you think Daniel Jones played that bad in Pittsburgh?
I actually don't. I don't think that he played that bad. I don't think that he played that bad the last couple of weeks. Although I will say, ball security in the pocket, those types of things, holding it a little bit longer than usual, probably needs to get cleaned up. And I'll take a look at those things in a forthcoming piece here at The Athletic. But I just think for like the national narrative, Zach, that was such low hanging fruit to say before you go all in on Daniel Jones. he's now turned back into Daniel Jones. And so,
Yep.
yeah, I was curious to see because I mean, you covered this team for a long time. They have never been that aggressive under Chris Ballard. And then boom, I'm thinking they're going to go try to make a move for Cam Taylor Britt, and they're bringing in a guy who, I believe he might be. I don't even know if they've had cornerbacks in Colts history like combined that have had two first team All Pro selection, let alone one guy who's done it in their career. So yeah, just your level of excitement and perhaps knowing that
Yeah,
Chris
the
Ballard has changed
best.
his stripes a little bit.
Yeah, a couple of things on this. The best corner they had before Gardner in terms of league-wide accolades. Kenny's separate because Kenny plays such a different corner position.
Yeah,
It was Vernon. It was sorry, excuse
Vontae.
me. It was Vontae Davis. R.I.P. Vontae Davis. But he was the last lockdown outside corner, and that was early in my tenure covering the team, 2014. But the reality is, Ballard has rolled the dice before. He traded a first-round pick for a defensive tackle, right?
Yeah,
That was DeForest Buckner. That worked out. He traded a first-round pick and a third-round pick for a quarterback who nobody wants to talk about anymore. That's Carson Wentz. That was a bust. That was a total miss. And that was Ursay pushing them to do that as well as the head coach. So he's rolled the dice before. But the reality is, I think that when you make this move, it also reflects Ballard has not done a great job at corner. He has not done a great job at corner. But this is going to help where he's been really solid and where he is, frankly, obsessed with, right? What position, James, is Chris Ballard obsessed with? In the world, he's going to put his five kids on a pedestal, and he's going to put this position group on a
it's
pedestal.
probably the D line. He loves the
It's
D
the
line.
defensive
Yeah.
line. He would spend first round picks on defensive linemen every year if Ursay let him. The reality is that group is pretty good. I have some questions now without Buckner, but they've got a pretty good group. This is how you help the pass rush. This is how you help an average pass rush. Sometimes good, sometimes not great.
Yeah.
This is how you help that with a guy like Sauce Gardner. It's also not their fault that their cornerback room is so uh, thin right now because they've just been killed by injuries. They're
Yeah,
getting some
we've
guys
had debates
back.
about this, Zach, where we were like, man, that one position, he just failed to address it. He finally addressed the cornerback position. They drafted guys, they brought guys in,
I
and then
like some
everybody
of the
got
guys
hurt.
that don't even. I know, and these guys are players. So this is a big move, but I think the interesting thing is you don't react to one loss. This was a move they were working on for 2 weeks, I was told, and they believe they have a team that's ready. And to go back to your previous point, who's the team in the AFC right now? It's probably New England, but again, they're doing this for the first time with this group. And I think Chris Ballard and the Colts, and I think Carly Ursay has a say in this as well. They see the wild, wild west right now in terms of this is wide open, and whoever gets hot in the playoffs can run this and go to the Super Bowl. And you know what wins in the playoffs? Usually it's the hottest team. Who's playing the best at that time? I don't think it's Kansas City. They have some flaws. Buffalo, like you said, they lost to the Dolphins. They lost to the Falcons. The Ravens are going to have to work like crazy just to get into the playoffs. They have one of the best players in the world. But a guy like JT going off could be the difference in this. And I go back to 2021, the last time the Colts had a really good team, and it burned at Chris Ballard and it burned at Jim Irsay that they didn't have a chance to take that team further because they knew what they had in this guy. Like this guy, Jonathan Taylor, was taking over the league, and he didn't get to play a snap of postseason football because they threw up on themselves in Jacksonville. And the
And
other
that,
thing, I want to mention one more thing, James. They make this move for Sauce Gardner because they don't think they can get this guy in free agency. That's a reality. Whether Colts fans want to admit it or not, why can't you just pay him enough? It's not that simple. And Chris Ballard is still pissed off that they didn't land Daniil Hunter a couple years ago. And from my understanding, they offered more money than Houston. That might get them over the hump and win them a division 2 years ago. They didn't do it. So this is why you make those moves. You learn from whiffs and near misses over the last couple of years.
oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at his approach to the offseason, you spent money that you've never spent at cornerback already with Javarius Ward. You went out and got Cam Bynum. You basically bought an entire new secondary or traded for it.
How does that look now? Those were all the right moves.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
telling Chris Ballard that he should have done this before. And I think he realized that.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a guy who has self admittedly said, I'm way too selfish. I'm too stubborn in my team building approach. My philosophy may not be what it should have been. Now, granted, a lot of that had to do with the quarterback because, to Chris Ballard's credit, when he has gotten the quarterback position right, he's been a quote unquote good GM. I just wrote that earlier today. And then when he has the quarterback position wrong, he's been a bad GM. That's usually how it
You
goes
could
in this
say
league.
that for every GM. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? Like, I mean,
But
yeah, that's the reality. But
he
it's his
doesn't get
job
an
to find the quarterback.
exactly. He doesn't get excused for all the misses and whiffs. And one of the biggest ones was Anthony Richardson Sr. And then now you've rebounded so Daniel Jones that in a way you've bought yourself more time. That's another thing that's underlying from all these decisions is yes, we know by trading for Sauce Gardner, Daniel Jones will be here for the long term. But you know who else is going to be here long term? Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard. Carly Ursay Gordon's not going to say, "Hey, go do this." And by the way, I'm not going to extend you. I'm not going to keep you around. I know Chris Ballard's under contract, I believe, through 2026, through the end of next season. But it wouldn't surprise me at all. And honestly, I think it's a matter of when, not if, he signs an extension. Like to this point, I think they can look at this new regime with the daughters can say, hey, you know what? We challenge you and Shane to get this right. You have. And so now to transition a little bit to your point you were making about JT, yes, Daniel Jones, I think, is their most valuable player just by the essence of the word. And we can get into the whole debates of MVP candidacy and all those types of things. But, and I look at MVP as like best player in the world. That's kind of how I look at it. And JT, what's crazy to me, Zach, and I didn't get to see, again, 2021. That was the year before I got on the beat. So hearing you and Joy Erickson and Stephen Holder and Mike Chappell say he's better than he was when he was a first team All Pro is mind blowing. So when you saw the Berlin performance and knowing that was his third career 200-yard rushing game for the Colts, more than every other Colts combined, how do you interpret what we're seeing from the running back position when it comes to him? Knowing a couple years ago, Zach, me and you were in the throes of a contract dispute between him and Jim Irsay where they did not want to pay this guy. And now it looks like you couldn't pay him enough.
Yeah, that's a nice tease for the story I'm working on. Don't give it all away. But I was in an elevator with Jim Irsay in Buffalo after JT scored 5 touchdowns against the Bills and absolute beat the crap out of Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, and the entire Orchard Park Stadium. And Jim Irsay said, "This reminds me of going to watch Gale Sayers when I was a kid."
Oof.
Now, Jim Irsay was prone to hyperbole, and he's told these
Yes,
stories all the
yes.
time, but I loved him for it because they were awesome. And you just don't get that kind of candor from an owner. What I saw from Jonathan Taylor in 2021 was remarkable. And I remember having debates with Mike Chappell over what was better, Edgerrin James at his peak or Jonathan Taylor. And just having that conversation tells you something. And Jonathan Taylor single-handedly brought the Colts back from whatever hole they were in that season. I think they were 1-4, which they usually were when I covered the team. But I mean, we're talking about going for an 80-yard touchdown against the Patriots and Belichick when the Patriots were good in an 11-man stacked box because Frank was afraid to throw the ball with Carson. So he just handed it off to JT. They have 11 guys in the line, and JT's still going for touchdowns. So let's not discount 5 touchdowns in Buffalo, beating Belichick in a fully stacked box against the Patriots. Like that was unbelievable. But what I told myself Sunday watching the game in Berlin was he is doing what no one else in the league is doing. He is single-handedly winning football games. The line's playing well, DJ's playing well, but Jonathan Taylor is completely stepping on defenses. He's stepping on them and burying them. He's burying the opponent. The reason the Colts won on Sunday was 28. So for my MVP vote, if it matters at all, it's like you can't replicate what that guy's doing, the value, the impact. I mean, these are dead plays. Like the one he broke for 80 yards was dead. I've never seen a guy get more yards that he's not supposed to get, and that's a credit to Jonathan Taylor. So I personally, this is my crusade. I hate that it's become a quarterback only award. I think it should go to the most valuable football player in the world because running backs work really freaking hard too. The quarterback might be the most important position. That doesn't mean they're the best player on the team. JT's the best player on this team. I think he's playing better than anyone. And I'll hear the Matthew Stafford argument, but I think JT's better than he was in 21. We'll just see if the story ends any different because, like you said, extend Shane Steichen, extend Chris Ballard, right? They've answered the bell. We got a long way to go. And we got some tough games in front. And this team's going to really reveal if they're for real the next couple months.
Absolutely. And to piggyback off of that, I've been at this point in my career in some loud environments. Me and you covered, I believe it was game 6 of the NBA Finals when the Pacers blew out OKC and they were up 30, hit a couple buzzer beaters at the end of quarters and halves, and that place was rocking. But boy, being over there in Berlin at their Olympic Stadium, and when JT broke that run for 83, and then the way in which he set history in that moment, because that was the run to pass Edgerrin James as the all-time leading rusher for touchdowns in Colts history. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, I was just debating with Mike Chappell, like, who's the best Colts running back? Is it JT yet? Is it somebody else? For this franchise, he is probably the best we've ever seen, which is high praise for a franchise. Now, granted, I get all these guys weren't always at their peak with the Colts, when it comes to Marshall Faulk and Eric Dickerson, and Edgerrin James, and others, and, Lenny Moore, if you want to go way back. But man, pound for pound, his resume is starting to look like one of the all-time greats. And before, Zach, it felt like, oh, this is all, sort of a Quentin Nelson type of thing. He's the only Hall of Famer really on the team. Now it feels like a two-headed race, in my opinion, with those two getting gold jackets in the future, especially if JT can stay healthy. And that's the other thing. He's healthy for the first time in a few years, and you're seeing what he's doing. But to go back to your other point about, all the success he's had, he's running wild, MVP, all those things. They're on track to make the playoffs. They will. I'm going to go out on a limb here. They're going to make the playoffs the first time since 2020, win the division for the first time since 2014. But now that you've gone all in with Sauce Gardner, you've hitched your wagon to Daniel Jones, JT is playing out of his mind. What is success for the Colts in the second half of this season? It's not enough just to knock off the Chiefs. That'd be great. But is it AFC Championship or bust? Is it Super Bowl or bust? Like, what's a realistic in your mind? What's a realistic ending that you can look at and say this season was not ultimately disappointing given everything we put into it?
Yeah, I think you'll know at the end of the season. I think that'll be an easy answer to tell whether this arrow is pointing up or whether this arrow is really confusing. Let me tell you a story. A couple years ago, our good friend Bob Kravitz and I are playing golf, and I'm playing out of my mind, and I'm just playing as good as I can play the game. And Bob goes, in his very Kravitz way, he says, "You know what they say? They say water always finds its level." And it really bothered me that he said that because I knew I was playing out of my mind and I played terrible the rest of the day. And water found its level. Now, if that happens to the Colts and they regress and this miracle turnaround season stumbles its way home, which is plausible. One, it's the NFL. Two, they got Seattle, they got San Francisco. San Francisco should have some players back by that point. They got Houston twice, and I don't want to discount Houston because they've had a bad year. That's the team the Colts have not gotten past in the AFC South. They got to go to Jacksonville in a couple of weeks. The last time they won in Jacksonville, you were in high school. So this is a tough schedule. They got Seattle. That defense just destroyed Jacoby Brissett and the Cardinals, and they're playing as well on defense as any team in the league. So the reality is they're going to have to earn it over the next couple months. And I don't think just hosting a home playoff game, which is what Jim Irsay wanted so badly, is gonna be enough. Now that means you won the division, which is a big step for this franchise. They haven't done that since Andrew Luck's third season.
Yeah, I think
which
it was
is ridiculous.
2014. So it's been a
Yeah,
while.
it's ridiculous. That was before the injuries. It's just crazy to think that. Now that's a big step, but that's not the bar in this town, and that's not going to be the bar just because they've had a bad run the last couple of years. They want more than a division title. Playing on divisional weekend would be a big step for this team. I still feel like the arrow is pointing up if you get there. But there's no guarantee they win a playoff game. So I think you're going to know at the end of the season if it was a success or not. But by no means is anything guaranteed right now. And, does Daniel Jones keep this up? That's another question that he needs to answer is, will water find its previous level, or is he a new Daniel Jones? Because I think that's going to answer a lot of questions moving forward as well.
Absolutely. I do think that he is a better player, so to speak. He's also got better talent and protection, and I think coaching and all those things around him with the Colts. But the turnovers are a bit of a head scratcher to a degree. They make you a little hesitant, and I get that it isn't all his fault. And like I said, I will dive into all these things next week coming off the bye. I get a lot of questions about whose fault is it, and trust me, I will get all into the weeds of everything that is Daniel Jones over the last 2 weeks and what we can, reasonably say is something to be worried about or something to, kind of dismiss. But the thing that kind of I fall back on, especially when it comes to Daniel and Shane. I just know that those two are joined at the hip when it comes to how they view football. And that to me is probably Daniel's best superpower is figuring out, okay, how do I read these defenses? How do I make sure I'm seeing my checks and things like that to get back to a higher level? I never expected him to stay sort of at the top 5 quarterback level that he was playing at earlier in the year, but I still think he can be a legitimate top 10 quarterback. Not turn the ball over as much. And granted, to his credit, even despite all of the mishaps in Berlin, fourth quarter, got to have it. Third and 21, 19-yard scramble. Fourth and 2, he throws a dot to Tyler Warren, who broke a tackle and kept going for some more yards.
What a catch. What a catch. That guy's a
Oh,
dude.
trust me, we could do a whole podcast on that dude. Actually, I just talked to our Nick Bumgarner about him, so look out for that here in the near future. A little rookie diary, so to speak, little rookie files on Tyler Warren. But yeah, I think that JT has gone to another level, but DJ is the straw that stirs everything and makes it all work because, I mean, you look at how their offense is balanced, man. Like, we were joking for a while there, Zach. They didn't even have a 100-yard receiver. There was probably like a good 6 or 7 straight games where they did not have a 100-yard receiver. They have the number one offense in the NFL by far. By far. It feels like they can roll out of bed and score 25. You know what I mean? So that to me is something that you can find confidence in. But at the same time, I look at it like you've done so well. And it's such a bad way to look at it, but it's honest. I think the fans feel the same way. They played so well, Zach, that now our previous expectations don't apply anymore. Like, you can't just
They've
make the
earned that.
playoffs. I know.
Yeah.
And they've earned
Yeah.
that pressure. They've earned those
What
expectations.
what a world to live in. The difference between 21 and this year, and those are the 2 years Jonathan Taylor has gone absolute crazy, is I think the Colts trust their quarterback down the stretch. And that's going to be a big thing because these defenses are going to do what's the number one thing on every defensive play caller's sheet going into these games. It's going to be stop 28. They're going to do whatever they can to stop 28. Then you got to deal with Alex Pierce, dude. Then you got to deal with Pittman over the middle. Then you got to deal with Josh Downs. And oh, by the way, they got the best tight end, the rookie tight end I've ever seen. And that includes Brock Bowers a couple years ago in Las Vegas. So they have that answer and they have the conviction in Daniel Jones to go do it. And in that Pittsburgh game, and yeah, some of the turnovers were on him, some of them were on the line and protections, but he threw for 340 yards. Like, we're still moving the ball against a good defense. Like, you're not going to win every week in the league. And they're also not the best team in the league, I don't think. But they have the potential to still move the ball when teams are geared up to stop their best player. So that's the fun part. And I think Shane has the answers. I think Shane is just has all the answers right now. He is on a heater.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing with the Colts. Whenever they've had issues offensively, it is never about moving the ball. It's about taking care of it. I mean, they had over 500 yards of offense against the Falcons, and they barely won because of a few, turnovers on downs, and had a couple missed kicks there from Michael Badgley, who I'm sure you're probably familiar with. So those things to me are more indicative of how they could get knocked off or how they could lose or how the season could not become what they want it to be. Because moving the football, they do that in their sleep now. And it's
They
weird
won.
to just kind of accept that that's the new reality.
I
We've seen
mean,
some bad Colts offenses. Last year, they had a quarterback, no disrespect to Anthony Richardson. He couldn't complete half of his passes. And
they
now on a
won.
bad day, Daniel Jones is still completing like 60% of his passes.
That's the secret. Like, that's the secret in this league. I wrote a lot about quarterbacks this summer. Shane Steichen won 8 games last year with a leaky defense and a quarterback that completed 47% of his passes. 8 games. What's he going to win with a quarterback that completes 60% of his passes and doesn't turn the ball over nearly as much? We're going to find out. But that's the interesting layer here is Shane Steichen has had success with Gardner Minshew, Justin Herbert, Philip Rivers, Jalen Hurts. And oh, by the way, he's going to be the QB whisperer in the league when Daniel Jones gets his next contract. So that's the reality. It's fun to watch. It's fun to see. And it is crazy to me to look at the stats every Sunday and say, he's having statistically as much success in this category as Peyton Manning did in 2004. Like, you cannot play the position better than Peyton Manning did in 2004. And
Yeah.
he's ahead of Andrew Luck in a couple categories before the shoulder and all that stuff. And like, that's also crazy. Credit to Shane Steichen, credit to Jim Bob Cooter. Those guys, they'll never admit this publicly. I think they were convinced that Daniel Jones was the guy a long time before they announced it. And you're seeing why. He's just completely in control of this offense. And now we're going to see him do it against some really, really good defenses, and we'll see if they're for real.
That's the question now going into Kansas City. Are you for real? And I think even in a bigger light, and that conversation will come if they knock off the Chiefs, is okay, are the Chiefs, is that dynasty finally over? Because to me, they're kind of up against it. They got the Broncos this weekend. That's a big game. The Broncos are 8-2. And if they lose that game, they're really going to be reeling against the Colts. And that's when you have an opportunity to kind of step on them and say, no, 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 no. You might have a chance to come back here and be the same old Chiefs, but not this year. And so, again, the analogy I've kind of given, Zach, is I'm a big NBA guy. The year the Pistons won in 04, if you look at like the era of teams around the Pistons, it's like you had the dynasty with the Lakers, and then you had the Spurs dynasty kind of emerge right after that. And then you got that random championship right there in the middle from the Pistons, where for 1 year, they kind of caught everybody lacking and pulled it off. And that, to me, is kind of what the Colts are chasing. Now, I get it's like probably a 2 to 3 year window at this point, depending on what DJ's contract looks like and some of the moves you make in the offseason. So you've given yourself a little bit of time. But this year, I think has become so important for this franchise and where they want to go. And it's just remarkable to see, how things have kind of unfolded. And the only thing, selfishly, and last thing I'll say, and Zach, I know you can attest to this, I wish the big man was around to see it. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
he would love this. He would absolutely, and I get that Carly Ursay-Gordon deserves a ton of credit for the move she's made, the aggression, all these things. But boy, this is what he talked about. This is what he wanted to get back to with the upper quartile and everything else.
I have a feeling if Jim Irsay was around, you'd be hearing a lot from him these days because he
Yeah,
loved to chirp when his team was doing well. He
absolutely.
also loved to chirp when they weren't doing well. So you heard a lot from him, but he's enjoying this, man. I know that. He is loving this. He's loving this team. He always believed in Chris Ballard. He always believed in Ballard's ability to build. And he was sold on Shane Steichen as well. And so it's just what a wild 11-month ride for this team. And it's going to get really interesting in the next couple months. And believe me, man, I'm not missing those playoff games.
Oh no, you're always welcome to come
And I
back
said
through.
games plural. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but at least game. We'll see.
Absolutely, and that to me will be very fun. Never covered, and I had never had an opportunity to cover a do or die game in the NFL, so that is surely coming. And now it's just about, okay, how do you build on that? So big one coming up after the bye week in Kansas City. Of course, I'll be there. I'm looking forward to that opportunity. But for anybody else listening, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Be a regular NFL fan. Don't stress yourself out watching the Colts. You get a chance to kick your feet up and say, hey, we're 8-2. We're top in our division and among the top teams in the conference, which is a good feeling. So you get a little chance to breathe, relax, and then get back at it. So I like to thank Zach for stopping by. Like I said, we got plenty of stuff we're working on behind the scenes to give you all the best Colts coverage, kind of put some context around what we're seeing here. So looking forward to that. So like I said, enjoy the weekend, and we'll check in with you all very, very soon.